Come on. There you go. Good boy. Well done. Hi, and welcome to the blank canvas that is episode 4 of Missing in Art. I hadn't really planned this far ahead. I sketched out the first 3 episodes, which were looking at the eye, beak and feathers of the bird and the different textures involved with those. But for episode 4, I hadn't really decided what to do. So I thought I'd return to a piece that I started a while back now in October, my croc. This piece is an absolute beast in every sense of the word. I've been working on it now for coming up to 200 hours, and I have only just finished the base layer, so potentially another 200 or more to go. I worked on it for most of October, pretty much every day, and then something came up, so I had to put it to one side. And initially my hope with this was to submit it for the Wildlife Artist of the Year this year, but came to the beginning of the year and I had another month to go, and I knew that wasn't enough. So I decided to submit it possibly for next year. I took a slightly different approach to this one. As you might know, I usually start with the eye because I like it to be looking at me from an early stage. But because I have a plan for the eye and I'm going to be doing a reflection of some wildebeest drinking, I thought I'd wait until I've properly conceived how that reflection is going to look before actually attempting it. I'm doing a lot more planning with this piece than I perhaps do on other works. Just because of the scale of it, it requires a little bit more thought. But having not worked on it for a while, I came back into the studio the other night and thought I'm just going to make a start on the eye. So what I thought I'd show you first is a 2-minute time lapse of my session from the other night. So here you go. So one of the big challenges of this piece is the scale of the work. It's huge. If you think about a crocodile eye, it's roughly the same size as a human eye. So with that in mind, this piece is probably about 3 times life size. So actually rendering detail on that kind of scale is quite a challenge, to say the least. I'm not changing my process. I'm going really slowly. And just letting the layers gradually build up. But I'm only really on layer 1. I mean, there are layers within the piece. Each individual scale, for example, has a few layers, but as a whole, I've only just finished the base layer, which is trying to sort of get every section of the croc rendered a little bit to then spray it and work on top of that. So I've just given it its first spray after that little session on the eye. Once you've sprayed it, the texture becomes just a little bit more textured, I guess, little less smooth, and that means that you can then work on top of that. With the spraying, I talked about it in, I think, episode 2. I talked about techniques for spraying. I always bear that in mind because you really just want that fixative solution to be just resting on top. If you're too close when you're spraying it, it just meshes it all in, and it dissolves a lot of the detail and gives more potential for the surface to become waxy. So I've given it a very light spray, and so all that work underneath is now fixed in place, mostly fixed in place. I mean, it's still a little bit loose, but that's what you want. You still have to be a bit careful when working on it, and obviously with a piece this size, you've always got to consider where your hand is. Someone asked me recently about smudging, and yeah, it's a consideration. You have to be bearing that in mind the whole time. So I use my elbow as like an anchor, and that means I can get to sections of the piece without resting my hand on it or my arm, and therefore smudging it. When you're working on a section of really fine detail, like for example the pupil of the eye, then I'll put down a piece of paper on top and rest my hand on that. I talked about it in the intro to this series, the 2 crucial elements to pastel pencil work: pressure and time. The time is because it's a slow medium, and been working so long on this piece already. You've just got to accept that it's going to take a long time, but see that time as quality time. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't go right and you might mess up, but I tell you, when it's going well, that's a wonderful feeling. So the time is important, but the pressure too, and you're going to think about it's the pressure that you apply with the pastel strip on the page, but you've got to think about it in terms of your whole arm. You've got to make sure that one is versatile, so when you're, say, resting your hand on that piece of paper to work on the fine detail, you don't want to be slumped over. You almost just want to be hovering, anchored in enough so that you can have control in the hand. You've just got to be aware that this is a very, very tactile, loose medium, and anything brushes over the surface, it's going to smudge. For me, it was a huge relief spraying it recently because it's been sitting here since October, so quite a few months exposed. Anything could happen. I keep a piece of paper over the top of it just to protect it, but there's all sorts that could go wrong. So having sprayed it is a nice feeling because you just know that all that work has been locked in place, and it can't be lost. You can still ruin it, of course, but that's what I mean about being really cautious and careful as you go. I tend to have no drinks in the studio or anywhere near the artwork. I allow myself the odd cup of tea, but nowhere near the artwork. So whenever Amy comes in here with her tea, hey, what are you working on? I'm always like, get out! So I decided this week I was going to spend some good time on the croc and move that along, because otherwise it'll just sit here forever, and then next year will come around and Wildlife Artist of the Year entries will be up and I won't be ready again. I'm really, really pleased with this piece so far. I haven't yet started to hate it, which is a good sign, even 200 hours in. I'm enjoying the challenge as well. It's requiring a lot of thinking and planning. But yeah, I'm kind of going all out with this one. I'm bringing in elements that have worked for me in the past, like the reflection in the eye. I've done a few pieces like that. And I'm also playing around with the composition, using that negative space. So actually the overall composition of this piece is portrait as opposed to landscape. All that space above is going to be negative space, just to emphasize how the croc is in the water, low down, stalking. I think having a lot of white space above that is just going to help emphasize that some more. So I need to find another word instead of emphasize. Shine a spotlight, maybe. So I'm playing around with the negative space, and I've got the reflection, and I'm going big. This is probably the biggest piece I've ever done. So hopefully those 3 elements will stand me in good stead. I've been supporting the David Shepherd Foundation for 11 years now, and every year I've submitted a piece for their wildlife art competition. And every year I've been accepted as a finalist, sometimes multiple times with a number of works. But I've never won it, and that is one of my big ambitions. So I'm hoping with this piece I might stand a chance. But I have also submitted something for this year, which is this elephant, which I'm very proud of. And this elephant is going to be appearing on some luxury gin bottles sometime this year. So keep an eye out for that. Don't worry, I'll tell you anyway. So, you know. And the other piece I've put in this year is my koala, or at least what's left of it. These are the ashes from the burning, and that was what was left of the paper. And if you scan the QR code, you'll get a link to the video of it burning on my YouTube. I always try and put in one of these statement pieces, so this is what I've gone for this year. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Thanks again for watching. I think what we're going to do next week is really try and simplify the whole process, loosen up the hand and try and produce some much quicker works. So we'll see how that turns out. But in the meantime, have a lovely week and I will see you soon.